As we continue the summit on Magnifica, Humanitas, and AI, we have with us John Clark Levin. He is a Yorktown Institute Fellow, serving as head of research at Kurzweil Technologies, where they are studying AGI. And AGI is artificial general intelligence. We've been dealing with AI throughout this conference, and now we're going to go into what is beyond AI and into the world of AGI and what does it mean. His expertise in this involves safety and alignment and using AI for STEM. That's the traditional fields in education of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In this presentation for the Good News Ministries Summit, he is going to take us beyond AI into what is predicted as the next step, AGI. Stay with us to the end to find out what its potential is for good and what we can do about the dangers it might present. And so thank you, John Clark, for saying yes to being part of this conference.
Very glad to be with you, Terry.
As we get started, I'd like you to explain what is a Yorktown Institute Fellow.
The Yorktown Institute is a think tank based in the US that focuses on national security and defense issues, and my work there focuses on the use of artificial intelligence for keeping the free world safe, but also assessing how those technologies can be used by authoritarian governments for harmful purposes around the world, either to repress their own populations or to engage in militaristic adventures abroad.
Cool. So we're going to find out more as we continue diving deeper into this. What you see from your perspective is going on with governments and security, military security, all those important issues that greatly affect all of us. And tell us something about the Kurzweil Technologies. How did that get started? What is it? What are you studying there exactly?
Ray Kurzweil is an AI scientist and futurist who came to mainstream attention in 1999 in a book called The Age of Spiritual Machines, when he predicted that we would get artificial general intelligence in 2029. And to define exactly what that means in this context, artificial general intelligence, or AGI, means AI that is at least at the level of trained or educated humans across all measurable cognitive tasks. So that's everything from writing to math to computer programming. But it does not say anything about consciousness or subjective experience. Those are philosophical and theological questions that are separate from AGI. So we're defining AGI here as being all about the capabilities, what AI can do, and not what it is in a theological sense.
So he started that he predicted back in, we said 1999,
99.
that in 2029 we'd be using AGI.
Yes. And at the time, although the book itself was a popular bestseller, many scientists in the field thought, that's so ridiculous. This must be just a ploy to sell books. And now, to their credit, many of the people who were sneering back in 1999 are eating a lot of crow and crediting Ray's work as being quite prescient, in fact.
So from the work that you do you think it's going to happen by 2029 or sooner maybe?
There's uncertainty around this, so I try not to express these as absolute predictions, but I think it's more likely than not that it will happen before the end of 2029. There's a chance it could happen even sooner than that, but I think probably not. And there's some chance it could be sometime in the first half of the 2030s. but I would say more than an 80% chance that it will happen within the next decade. And the chance that this is something decades away or impossible is now looking quite small.
Oh, so it's we're out of the realm of the impossible and we're entering into the possible. And are we ready for it? Do you think our society is ready for it or our world?
I've got a really short, succinct answer for you on that, Terry. No, we are not ready, especially because most of our institutions developed when the pace of change was much slower. So, for example, when the US Constitution was written in 1787, although technological change was starting to become noticeable, for an ordinary person, there would be no difference over the course of an entire lifetime in the 18th century. Nothing you would notice in daily life. In the 19th century, technological change became noticeable in daily life. A lot of people lost jobs on farms and had to start working in factories. The steam engine came along. Electricity toward the end of that century was introduced. But still, life for someone born in the early 19th century and who died in the late 19th century didn't change that profoundly. The 20th century was much more dramatic, going from the age of horses to the age of the iPod in the span of one century, going from the Wright brothers in 1903 to putting a man on the moon just 66 years later. And a core argument of Ray Kurzweil's work is that all those technological trends are correlated. They are reflections of a deeper and more fundamental phenomenon going on. It's not just steam engine technologies over here and steel is over here and airplanes are somewhere else. They're all interconnected. And the question is, what connects them? And the key connection is information technology. So anything that allows humans to store and manipulate and share information more easily makes innovation easier. So, for example, the printing press toward the end of the Middle Ages allowed information about new inventions to spread much more easily around Europe. Computers then are just the next step in this long march of information technology. And AI is just the latest manifestation of what computers can do. So, the really important thing for viewers to keep in mind is that although AI seems like it has just exploded onto the scene in the past few years, it's really just the culmination of something that's been going on since the agricultural revolution many thousands of years ago.
When was the topic of AI, and the actual term artificial intelligence first used? How did that evolve?
This summer, we are celebrating the 70-year anniversary of the term artificial intelligence, which was coined for a seminar at Dartmouth College when a group of eminent professors got together for what they thought would be figuring out the whole problem of artificial general intelligence in one summer. It turned out to be more than 7 decades, but that moment at Dartmouth was the foundation of the field.
So it feels new to most people, but yet it's been evolving since that time that you mentioned. And
Yes.
so uh, what excites you about AI? What do you think makes this a good thing that it's happening?
What I'm most excited about is the potential for breakthrough medical progress. Medical progress for the past century has been very slow and painstaking, a lot of trial and error, so-called wet lab work, where scientists working with pipettes and petri dishes in a physical lab have to experiment and gradually find potential medicines in a huge number of possibilities. It's a needle in a giant haystack, a mountain of hay, even. And as a result, that progress has been tragically slow and expensive. And the medicines that are created are often too expensive for sick people to access. And although corporate greed and other economic factors can play a role in that, I would argue the fundamental reason why medicine is still so expensive, especially in life-saving treatments like cancer medicine, is that it just costs so much to develop treatments that actually work. AI promises to upend that dynamic dramatically. And the reason is problems in biology are so complex that humans can't just look at the data from science experiments and immediately see a hidden pattern. AI has a superpower for pattern recognition. And by leveraging that superpower, human scientists can find patterns that we otherwise never could. AI can look at the sequences of amino acids that go into a protein and figure out how that protein folds up into a 3D shape in the body. And it's that 3D shape that governs most of how it interacts with the rest of the body. And by doing this at great scale, hundreds of millions of proteins have now, thanks to AI, been characterized in terms of their three-dimensional shapes. That allows us to find medicines much more quickly and cheaply. And going forward, as we get closer to artificial general intelligence, which can do the work of many, many scientists much faster, we'll likely get real breakthroughs in challenging diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's and heart disease.
Is AI already providing any breakthroughs? How far along have we gotten in it actually helping with the medical research?
Yes, the first drug designed end to end by AI, meaning AI found both the molecular target and the small molecule drug to bind to that target, passed its phase 2A clinical trial about a year ago. So we are quickly going from essentially the cover of Popular Science magazine saying someday maybe AI will help to actual doses in bodies. This is happening. So we will likely see the first FDA approval of a drug designed wholly by AI in the next few years. But even before that, approvals that are now being granted by the FDA are being accelerated by AI's effect, helping drug companies do this work more quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, I mean that alone is a benefit that I believe is God-given, you
Yes.
know. So yes, there are, and we'll talk about that later, but there are potential dangers, and we need to understand those. But I do think we first need to understand that there are real benefits. And so, what in your research, what else besides the medical field have you seen AI or what's developing into AGI? Besides medicine, what else is happening that we can get excited about?
Two others that really jump out in my mind. One is clean energy and the potential for AI to help clean up pollution and reverse climate change. So there is a lot of talk right now about the environmental impacts of AI. And it's true, it does have real impacts when we build these data centers and run them at a huge scale around the country and around the world. But AI also has a superpower for materials science discovery. And it's for roughly the same reasons I discussed with biology. Material science progress is about finding patterns in a really huge and confusing mountain of hay, finding that one needle in the haystack. And it is already being used to find materials that would be more efficient in the creation of solar photovoltaic panels. So that will make it more cost effective to use solar instead of dirty fossil fuels. And also, battery chemistry is a little known area where AI can really make the difference. The reason is as follows. Although the panels for solar itself are in much of America cost competitive with fossil fuels, often even cheaper, the problem is the sun is only shining half the day and only shining brightly half the year. So you need to store up that energy for the times when the sun is weaker or not shining. And that requires huge batteries. And batteries at the scale to store that much electricity are very expensive and have dirty chemistries, involve rare earth elements or other pollution side effects that have slowed the adoption of solar for actually replacing fossil fuels rather than just supplementing the power grid a little bit. AI has a superpower for discovering better, cheaper, cleaner battery chemistries. So as we get closer to AGI, AI that can do all the work of scientists much faster and cheaper, that will allow solar and eventually fusion, which is a clean form of nuclear that's the same energy source that powers the sun, to make energy much cheaper and cleaner all around the world. Also, there's a lot of potential for carbon capture technology, which we've had for decades, but it's just too expensive to be worth it in many cases. As that becomes much cheaper, thanks to AI finding better chemistries and approaches for carbon capture, we can reverse harmful effects of climate change much more effectively than we can today. The second thing that really excites me from the standpoint of changes to daily life for ordinary people is humanoid robotics. Now, this sounds pretty sci-fi, and a lot of people might think it's weird at first, but in a small number of years, robots will be capable enough to perform a lot of domestic labor that people currently have to do in the home. And disproportionately, that labor falls on women more heavily almost everywhere in the world. So a lot of the cooking and cleaning tasks that take people away from spending quality time with their families can ultimately be automated by robotic labor. And that could recenter a lot of the time that we spend now just on maintenance tasks, on being really present and deeply relational with the people we care about most.
To get that technology, the robotic technology into the homes, to for the average person, somebody listening to this going, "Oh yeah, I've wanted to have a maid for all the." It's like, I wish somebody else would clean my house or whatever. Is it going to be an expensive technology? Is it going to be expensive for the and out of reach of the average person to actually use that robotic technology and get that kind of help?
That's the key question. It will start out expensive, but then rapidly get cheaper. So today, this technology costs roughly between $50,000 and $100,000 per unit. By the time the robots are actually good enough to perform the work I'm talking about, they'll be more in the 30,000 to 50,000 range. But most people won't pay all that money up front. Instead, they'll be financed a lot like cars. So initially, that might be a $750 a month payment. Pretty soon, it'll be more like $450 a month. I'm speaking very loosely and approximately, of course, but it's the sort of expense that many families will find worth it and within reach.
Well, let's get a little bit into the potential dangers of this,
Yeah.
the downside. So, imagining somebody has, instead of buying a second car, they have the one car and they buy a robot,
Yes.
and they've got kids. And we've gone through a few generations of what we call latchkey kids, kids that are put in front of a television or an iPad or whatever, so that the parents can go off and do whatever they're doing, and the kids are being babysat by these technologies. Isn't it possible that families might want to put the robots in charge of taking care of the kids? What would that world be like?
I'm sure some people will choose to do that, and that will be a real problem that I think the church is actually well equipped to speak on and lead people out of. But for the most part, I think the drive that people have to connect with other human beings, especially their family, is very deep and fundamental and inherently part of the human person. And if we were free to spend that time loving and being loved rather than chasing a dollar to put food on the table, that would, I think, for most people, actually let them spend more time relationally rather than putting the robots in charge of the kids. But you're right, some people will do that, and that's a problem we'll have to engage with at that time.
Well, I do, in my own opinion, think that we're at a point in societal changes where uh, people are longing more for that connection, that human connection, because kids who have grown up, they're now adults, have grown up without much human connection with their parents, and then the later generations who texting, they'd be sitting right next to each other or across the room from each other, and they'd be texting each other instead of actually face-to-face human connections. And a lot of people stuck in the endless loop of scrolling through social media for that next dopamine hit.
Yeah.
um, I see that that kind of situation has been creating a genuine reawakening of, hey, we are meant for connection. I want to belong to other people. I want to belong to groups. I want to, I see that in the surgence of young adults coming into the Catholic faith. Over the past couple of years, it's been growing exponentially, the amount of interest in non-churched young adults turning to the Catholic faith, and people who've been away from the church or did not get much. Maybe their parents took them to church occasionally, but now they're really hungry for it. And I've studied that issue in depth. And one of the main reasons why this phenomenon is happening is because they want a sense of belonging. And the COVID lockdowns helped
Yes.
speed this process along, because all of a sudden we couldn't have any human contact except for the people we're living with, which wasn't always the best scenario. There were people stuck in abusive homes, for example.
Yeah.
And so those who were teenagers or almost teens during the COVID lockdowns are now reacting to that by saying, I want to be out with people. And, I even think that the teen takeovers that's been, growing in cities where the teens just they communicate with each other that, hey, let's meet up at the mall or this street or whatever. And they just take over partying in large numbers, which causes problems. There's looting, there's endangerment, there's it's a problem. And I really think that that's a part of, hey, I want to belong. I want to belong. So in my opinion, the artificial world, the artificial intelligence world, is coming at a time when we, at least in our society, and I know in others as well, are at a point of, I want to connect human to human.
Yeah.
I don't want a robot babysitting my kids. I want to be playing with my kids, while the robot, vacuums the floor.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think I see God's hand at work in the timing of this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you expressed that very well.
Okay. So you mentioned the superpowers of AGI, and well, AI, first of all. And a lot of times it's often referred to as superhuman, that AGI is going to be like a superhuman. What does that mean exactly? And what is the reality there?
Let's think about it in a scientific context. Imagine a scientist with good reasoning ability, but not Einstein. But that scientist was able to think 100,000 times faster than Einstein and remember verbatim all scientific research ever published, and then split itself into 1,000 telepathically communicating copies to tackle really hard problems together. That's the kind of scientist that AGI would be even from the beginning. But then it would be repurposed to advance AI research even further. So even if the reasoning ability started merely at the level of a very smart human scientist, very quickly it would likely become quite superhuman. So then it really is Einstein, but at super speed with super memory with many copies working together.
Isn't that a danger, to have something superhuman around?
Yes, it is. And that's what makes this such a challenge. The same biology AI that could cure cancer could also be used to create a deadly biological virus that could trigger a pandemic far worse than anything that's ever happened in history. So the challenge now for the human family at the level of citizens and voters and the corporations building this and the governments regulating it and international bodies and non-governmental organizations like the church is how do we balance those trade-offs in a way that's fair to everyone, or at least as fair as it can be?
And how do we motivate people to come on board with the moral issues of it and the protection and to, like you said, to vote, to pay attention to which candidates running for office are knowledgeable, first of all, about AI and AGI and its potential, and are willing to regulate. Because I know there is, for example, the right now going on, there's this race to grow AI faster, but we need to maybe slow it down. But if we slow it down, China's going to get ahead of us. And if I slow down my company and your company doesn't slow down, then I'm left in the dust. Speak about that.
Yes, this arms race is something that Pope Leo addressed pretty directly in Magnifica Humanitas, saying that we need to disarm AI. What he meant by that wasn't just turning away from AI for militaristic purposes. He also meant turning back from the arms race. The danger of an arms race is that if the US and China are both trying to get AGI first with no safety precautions or guardrails, there's more chance that as they cut corners to win the race, there will be some lapse in safety that causes a terrible catastrophe. So, one comparison I give is to gain of function research in virology. So, gain of function is the process where a natural virus can be engineered in the lab to be even more deadly, so scientists can study how to build better vaccines and treat it better. Now, some scientists say the benefits of that outweigh the risks and we should do it, but do it very, very carefully. Some scientists say, no, it's too dangerous. We should ban gain of function. But everyone agrees if you're doing gain of function research on a potential pandemic virus, you have to do that at the highest levels of biosafety protocols. So the scientists doing that have to have gloves and masks and hoods and isolators, the whole sci-fi setup to work with it. And if there were someone somewhere in the world doing gain of function research with no gloves, no mask, no hood, no isolators, just loosey-goosey vials on a lab bench somewhere, everyone would agree that is grossly immoral because it imposes risk on billions of innocent people who had no say in that decision, whether that was the right risk versus benefit trade-off. So, in a similar way, as we race toward artificial general intelligence, we need certain safeguards in place to lower the risk of the virus getting out of the lab, so to speak. And scientists already know what a lot of those precautions would be. What we need now is the political and diplomatic will to get the US and China to talk to each other about this and restart the AI safety focused talks that happened in Geneva in May of 2024 and have been stalled under the current administration. So if those talks could restart, and if the US and China could agree on basic safety precautions that wouldn't require either of them to cede their competitiveness in the race, they're just essentially doing the same work but with gloves and masks and hoods and isolators, that would reduce a lot of the risk, and then all the other countries would pretty much join in with that. If we can get the US and China to agree, that pretty much solves the problem for now.
How likely do you think China is willing to agree?
Actually, at this point, Terry, there's probably more willingness in China to engage on AI safety than in the United States. That has changed somewhat over the past 2 months or so. The Trump administration has shown some signs of being more open to regulating dangerous AI technology. But still, at this point, I would say it's the United States that has more work to do on that than China. The Chinese are actually a very paranoid regime at the level of the Chinese Communist Party. All authoritarian governments are paranoid. They have to be. But the Chinese Communist Party is especially paranoid. The leadership class of that regime was deeply traumatized by the 1989 protests in Tiananmen Square. And so ever since then, they have been panicked by anything that seems like it might threaten the domestic dominance of the regime. So, for example, if people make Winnie the Pooh memes about the leader, Xi Jinping, those are censored on the Chinese internet because they fear if people mock the leader in that way, that could bring down the party. And so, if the Chinese government can be convinced of the scientific case that recklessly racing toward AGI without proper safeguards could destabilize their regime, then they will have a very strong incentive to work with the United States and other international partners to do this in a more responsible way.
Well, that's encouraging to know because
Yes, that
because
has
we're
not
so
been well
used to,
reported in America.
yeah, that you're right. And because we're very conditioned to being afraid of the Chinese.
Yes.
And so, I mean, there are enemy. We've been in an arms race with them and with Russia. And so is Russia doing anything in this research? I would imagine they are.
No. The
Oh,
reason for that is AI research in the direction of AGI is extremely expensive. So it used to be back when AI just meant software that humans had to devise on their own and then program into the computer, fingers on keys. That could be done by a couple smart guys in a garage. Think of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. They just through their own insight could very cheaply build software that outcompeted IBM. Today, AI research is very different from programming fingers on keys. Today, AI research involves taking basically a whole internet's worth of data and putting it in a hyperdimensional abstract mathematical space that no human scientist fully understands, and then running hundreds of thousands of advanced computer chips like the graphics cards we use for gaming to do a ludicrous amount of math, finding statistical patterns in that gigantic amount of data. And from that process springs forth intelligence. And it's spooky and it's sci-fi, and no one knows exactly how that works. So, because that is a brute force process with so many computer chips and so much electricity to build intelligence that way, actually, not really build it if you think about it, but grow it more like a creature in a lab, that is something that only the United States and China can really afford. Training next generation models will be approaching $10 billion and will take approaching $100 billion of infrastructure. That's 100 billion with a B. So that really narrows down the list of countries that can afford to do that. But that's a good thing because it means that rogue states like North Korea don't have access to building bioweapons that way.
That's good to know. What are some of the dangers that we need to, as Catholics, as people who live by a moral code, people who respond to Pope Leo's call to, we have the responsibility, we have the calling by God to influence and make a difference in AI's advancement and AGI's development. So, what can we actually be doing?
Most people think of AI today as ChatGPT, but for the great majority of Americans, most of the interaction they have every day with AI is actually not chatbots, it's social media algorithms, which are a form of AI. Even if you're a ChatGPT power user, 50 or 100 queries a day, that pales in comparison to a lot of Americans who are spending 2, 3, 4 hours a day mainlining social media content. And the incentives behind those algorithms can be very toxic. The corporations that design the algorithms, companies like that makes Facebook and Instagram, are just to maximize their revenue. They want to sell ads, and the way to sell ads is to sell your eyeballs to the highest bidder. They have found by a multi-billion dollar research and development process that the best way to attract your eyeballs and your engagement, as they call it, meaning watching, liking, subscribing, commenting, is to make you scared or angry. This is something that the algorithms just discovered experimentally on their own. There was no evil genius at Facebook saying, let's make people scared and angry and divide Americans and set them against each other. That was the algorithms working by brute force to discover something about human nature. And that's a very interesting Catholic angle on this. The algorithms are reflecting our own vices back to us. The algorithms are reflecting our own vices back to us. When we are wrathful, for example, the algorithm will learn to show us what they call rage bait, content that is just designed to make you really mad at someone. When we crave fast stimulation, have short attention spans, and give in to short attention spans, the algorithm will learn to bombard us with quick dopamine. Those 8-second videos where you're scrolling, you don't even consciously control your thumb, you're on to the next one. And when we guzzle flattering lies, content online that says that our ideas are good and right and true, and the other side is evil and bad and hates America, then propaganda like that will muscle the truth off our news feeds and off our screens. So that's not something that can really be solved with a top-down solution. Although in this encyclical, Pope Leo does heap a fair amount of criticism on tech leaders for profiting in these ways that exploit people, he does not let us as users off the hook. He calls cyberspace a battleground, and it is very literally that. And each of us, as a soldier on that battleground, has a responsibility to avoid rage bait, to avoid content that divides us and makes us frightened or fearful or angry.
That takes a lot of self-discipline.
Yes, it was never promised that this would be easy, Terry, and that's the challenge that we face. Yes, it is extremely appealing to watch a video that tells you that you're right and you're amazing about everything. And it takes discipline and it takes the cultivation of virtue to say no, to hit the unsubscribe button, to swipe away from the app, to put your phone down.
Put the phone down. Yeah, yeah.
And as we get closer to AGI, just tying it back to that endpoint, AGI will be able to create fake content much more convincingly even than what's around today. So all of your users will have seen some deepfake content online, whether they knew it or not. They will have seen images and videos of scenes that never occurred, but purporting to be real. As we get to AGI, that will be totally indistinguishable from real content. And also, the people you're interacting with online could be bots indistinguishable from real humans. So, right now, if you talk to one of the bots powered by yesterday's technology, it might give you a shallow answer to something, but for the most part, it can just put out spam links or hurl abuse at you. If you interact with one of these bots for 5 minutes, you won't be fooled into thinking this is another real human being. Next generation bots, the bots created by AGI, will be indistinguishable from humans. So you can imagine in a future pandemic or natural disaster, there could be someone on social media who has a name and what looks to be a human profile picture, and they say, don't take the vaccine. My child took the vaccine and now there's blood coming out of her ears. And it shows a picture of a bleeding child or something horrific like that. It tugs at your heartstrings and you say, wait a minute, are you a bot? And it says, no, I'm not a bot. I beg you to believe me. That will be very difficult for humans to emotionally process. We're not ready for that. Our brains are designed for the assumption that anything that acts like a human is a human. And we are rapidly entering a world where that will no longer be true. And so we'll need new forms of personal discernment and new forms of regulation that we can advocate for through our governments in democratic societies to protect us and ensure humanness online. So there are some proposals, for example, that would require people on social media to authenticate, yes, I'm really a human. Here's a picture of my passport or my driver's license. And in some ways, that would make the problem better because bots can't fake that very easily. But that kind of authentication online would strip people of their anonymity, and then it would be tempting for governments to use that to repress their citizens for political reasons, to crack down on people who disagree with the government. So a very important area of research now, Terry, is scientists trying to figure out how we can authenticate online that someone is a real human without stripping them of potential anonymity and allowing governments to abuse them.
So when it is impossible for the average person to know whether what they're seeing, as they scroll through social media, whether it's a real person or not, so how do we deal with that? How should we handle that?
Ultimately, it will come down to trust. There have to be some gatekeepers who we each have to choose to trust. That might be a credible news organization, for example. Because none of us has the time to fact check all the way back to the original source everything we read. It's good to do that when you can, especially for high stakes issues, but there are only 24 hours in a day for any of us, and no one can fact check literally everything. So at a certain point, you have to judge which news sources are credible, worthy of your trust, and which are not. And then for high stakes issues, it's usually important to triangulate between several different news sources. So, for example, if the New York Times alone reports something, it's probably true, but there's a chance it could be either false or misleading for one reason or another. But if the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and The Economist all independently come to the same conclusion, that's much stronger evidence that what they're reporting is actually true.
So, yeah. So, in your research, are you looking at that too? Are you developing yeah, ways or ideas on how a Catholic can, or any person for that matter, can navigate this new world of AGI?
Ultimately, a lot of it comes back to cultivation of virtue.
Mm.
Think back to social media algorithms. If people demanded content that was slow and nuanced and thoughtful and edifying, even today's algorithms would show them more of that than they could ever watch. The reason for the sickness ultimately is not the technology, it is a sickness within us collectively. And that is something that no law, no engineering breakthrough can fix. That is a moral and ethical problem, and one that Pope Leo and the Church are very well placed to address, to call us back to that moral obligation we have to each other to be cautious and responsible about how we engage with information online.
And we need to answer the call to be evangelizers. We're all called by our baptism to be evangelizers. And in this new world of AGI, and first of all, AI, it's more crucial than ever to help make things go in the right direction by helping people who are not churched, people who don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, to come and bring them into the faith. We need to bring them into the faith because that's really the source of moral values. It's the Holy Spirit who really inspires in us and teaches us the moral life and how to live it out. And so the more concerned we are about the world, what is it coming to with AI and AGI, the more we should be feeling passionate about being evangelizers.
Yes, the church offers a vision of human dignity that does not bow to money and power. And almost every other source of authority in modern life has been shown to bow to money and power. Sadly, in the history of the church, sometimes senior figures within the church have bowed in that way. But I'm actually very pleased with the current direction of the church's leadership and the impact that Pope Leo has had with this encyclical. I have seen atheist teenagers on TikTok reading and discussing Magnifica Humanitas, and that would not have been the case of most previous Roman Catholic encyclicals. So I'm encouraged to see it having so much breakthrough mainstream cultural impact because people are hungry for that. It doesn't matter whether they're Catholic or not, Christian or not, theistic or not. People understand that TikTok influencers aren't the right sources of moral authority to ground our worldview on. And so this is a moment when the vision of human dignity that the church offers can transform society far beyond the walls of the church itself.
Yes, and that's really the bottom line. That's what we all have to keep in mind. That is our source of hope. If we feel worried or fearful, and like you said, that scrolling that we do on social media can just trigger what is negative in us, what is unhealthy in us, what are we worried about, what do we fear. And so we need to do self-discipline, practice self-discipline to put down that phone, or to regulate. I'm going to look at and like only the videos or only the social media posts that are ethical. It's just like in the old days when television was the thing that was the new technology. And then gradually it became more and more immoral. Uh, when I was raising my kids, I had to teach them how to and why to turn away from TV shows that were awfully fun, but the main characters couldn't wait to get in, have sex with each other, on the first date. And, it's like we have to choose what TV shows we watch. Well, likewise, we have to choose what social media posts we watch. And we need to teach our children that, and we need to teach the rest of society that. And I think that is a calling that everybody needs to take seriously and spread. And uh, one way of spreading that is to the viewers watching this to, first of all, like these videos and share them and get it around so that, I mean, an easy way to evangelize is to share something that is evangelizing, with your friends, and don't be afraid to post them on your Facebook page, even though you got people on your Facebook page from your family that are anti-Catholic or whatever. We need to have the courage. We need to rely on the Holy Spirit who gives us that courage. And I think with all the dangers that exist and all the good potential that exists, I think we're in an exciting time. I think we are going to be forced to respond to the calling that we've had all along, but many of us have ignored or done very little with.
Yes.
Well, I just thank you. I mean, it's been very informative. It's been very helpful to know. And I ask God to bless everyone watching this to hear what your calling is and to go forth boldly in it.
Thank you so much, Terry. It was great being with you.